Why do you lead? Before you examine your team's motivation, examine your own. Not what sounds strategic, not what your board expects, not what your title requires. What actually drives you? Let me make this concrete. Imagine a leader who says they care about long-term impact, but reacts defensively when their decisions are questioned. Or a leader who says they value autonomy, but tightens control the moment uncertainty increases. That gap is not theoretical. That gap is motive misalignment. And when your leadership role is not aligned with your internal motives, that misalignment does not stay hidden. It leaks. And over time, it shapes the system. This is the mechanism you need to understand. Leadership amplifies what already exists in you. If you are driven by influence, you will seek influence. If you are driven by recognition, you will seek visibility. If you are driven by stability, you will avoid volatility. If you are driven by autonomy, you will resist constraint. If you are driven by order, you will impose structure. There's nothing wrong with motives. The problem is not the motive. The problem is misalignment. Because when the role feeds your motive, energy increases. And when the role frustrates your motive, tension increases. Now, here's the critical transition. When tension accumulates, behavior changes. And when behavior changes, climate changes. This is how internal misalignment becomes external reality. Research in motivational psychology shows that people differ in relatively stable internal drivers. And those drivers influence persistence, satisfaction, and performance across roles. So, when role demands align with internal motives, several things happen. Energy increases, clarity increases, resilience increases, decision speed stabilizes. But when role demands conflict with internal motives, a different pattern appears. Fatigue increases, irritability increases, control increases, withdrawal increases. This is not abstract. You can observe it in people's behavior. Because misalignment does not stay internal. It becomes visible in tone, timing, and reaction under pressure. And this is where leadership becomes exposed. Under pressure, you do not act from policy, you act from drive. So, if recognition drives you, criticism destabilizes you. If control drives you, uncertainty destabilizes you. If harmony drives you, conflict destabilizes you. If autonomy drives you, governance destabilizes you. Pressure reveals motive. And your team reads it immediately. Now, follow the consequence. When leaders are internally aligned, teams experience consistency, and consistency reduces noise. When noise is reduced, judgment improves. And when judgment improves, downstream consequences reduced. But when leaders are misaligned, teams experience volatility. Volatility increases caution. Caution delays escalation, and delayed escalation multiplies risk. This is not about inspiration. It is about system stability and a consequence. Research on fundamental motives, including the work based on the risk motivation profile, shows that people carry stable motivational drivers that influence behavior and satisfaction. Different motives produce different leadership expressions, different strengths, different risks. So, alignment matters more than profile. There's no universally correct motive for leadership. There's only coherent motive. If you are driven by impact, build systems that increase impact. If you are driven by order, build systems that clarify structure. If you are driven by belonging, build systems that strengthen cohesion. But if you pretend to be driven by what you are not, strain accumulates. And here's the progression. Strain produces distortion. Distortion produces inconsistency. Inconsistency erodes trust. And trust erosion increases consequence. So this is not about authenticity as a concept. It is about operational stability. You should enjoy the process of leadership. Not every meeting, not every task, but the role itself. Developing people, making decisions under pressure, holding standards when it is uncomfortable, taking responsibility when outcomes are uncertain. If leadership constantly drains you, something is misaligned. And if you stay misaligned long enough, you contaminate the system. So ask yourself a few uncomfortable questions. Would I lead if visibility disappeared? Would I lead if recognition stopped? Would I lead if influence decreased? Would I lead if pressure increased? Your answers expose motive, and clarity prevents distortion. This leads to another critical point. Motivation and leadership cannot be separated. You cannot stabilize others if your own drive is unstable. Leadership begins with self-alignment. But do not measure alignment through enthusiasm. Measure it through stability. Energy stability across quarters. Reaction stability under criticism. Decision stability under uncertainty. Responsibility when trade-offs are irreversible. Because if your internal drive collapses under pressure, alignment is weak. And if your internal drive stabilizes under pressure, alignment is strong. Alignment is not emotional comfort. It is behavioral consistency under consequence. Now, extend this to climate. Your motivation state shapes emotional climate. If you are energized, people feel direction. If you are frustrated, people feel instability. If you are defensive, people become cautious. If you are volatile, people filter information. If you are coherent, people escalate risks earlier. And this follows a pattern. Repeated reactions become expectations. Expectations become culture. And culture determines how a system behaves under pressure. Under pressure, people do not invent behavior. They repeat learned patterns. And your motive becomes embedded in those patterns. Now, consider the tension point. There's always a trade-off between motive and role demand. If your motive is control, but the role requires delegation, tension appears. If your motive is harmony, but the role requires confrontation, tension appears. If your motive is recognition, but the role requires anonymity, tension appears. When that tension is not resolved, coping behaviors appear. Micromanagement, avoidance, excessive meetings, delayed decisions, overcorrection after mistakes. And teams interpret these behaviors as leadership style. But often they are identity strain. And identity strain has a cost. It reduces clarity. It reduces patience. It reduces long-term thinking. And it increases self-protection. And self-protection spreads. When leaders protect themselves, teams protect themselves. When teams protect themselves, transparency decreases. When transparency decreases, risk accumulates. This is not a morale problem. It is structural risk. So alignment is not comfort. Alignment is fit between motive and responsibility. And it requires 3 actions. First, name your dominant motives honestly. Second, examine whether your leadership role feeds or frustrates them. Third, redesign your behavior before misalignment redesigns the system. That redesign can take different forms. It may mean delegating certain domains. It may mean strengthening skills where your motives create blind spots. It may mean stepping out of a role that drains you structurally. That decision is not weakness, it is discipline. One final test. When pressure and visibility increase at the same time, does your energy stabilize or spike? Stability suggests alignment. A spike suggests threat to your motive. So, if leadership feels like constant defense, identity is misaligned. If leadership feels demanding but coherent, identity is aligned. Alignment does not remove the difficulty. It removes internal contradiction. And internal contradiction is the first thing that leaks into the system. If this way of thinking is useful, the deeper analysis lives in the newsletter. That is where I examine leadership capacity at structural level. If you want the next breakdown, subscribe to the channel. And if this changes how you see motivation and leadership, share it with someone who leads. Rewire how you lead.